Okay, Leila, welcome to the podcast, the first episode. So, guys, this is our guest, Leila. So I will say how I met you. So I met you at John's Planet Cambo event in 2019, and the reason I got you on the show is because from the moment that I met you, I thought you were definitely like a legit yoga person. And for someone that works in fitness like myself, obviously you see social media is absolutely inundated with yoga girls like doing all kinds of silly poses, but it seems more like a modeling profile rather than anything actually connected to spirituality. And when I went to John's event, there's a lot of people there that are connected to the kind of spiritual path, and I often thought that yoga was almost like just to kind of seem like almost like a sort of virtue signaling, like just trying to show off that you're involved in some kind of spiritual path. But when I actually spoke to you, I got a genuine insight that you actually cared about the development of the mind and the soul, as well as, of course, doing some fancy poses. But we didn't even talk about the asanas, I think it's called in the yoga term. But we didn't even talk about that at all. We just spoke about spirituality and stuff. And so yeah, getting to know you has been a real interesting insight into what yoga is. So yeah, that's kind of how we met. But yeah, so I guess you know what is first of all just introduce yourself and let the listeners know who you are.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me here. It's a great honor to be here on the first episode. Yes, I am a yoga teacher, and I have met yoga on a strange synchronicity path where it just changed my life. And the more I went into depth into the discipline and the science of yoga, the more I understood reality and existence itself. So for me, it's not just about the body shape and what we are often used to in the Western countries. It's a whole path of self-realization, and all the techniques and practices of yoga bring you there. And so I just got super passionate about it, and I made it my core objective in life to be in that state of unity, to be in that state of balance and connection with the nature of reality. And this is what I share with love with everyone that I meet, including yourself. When I met you, conversations about yoga and the techniques and how we can better ourselves and learn more about ourselves. This is what mattered the most.
Cool. And one thing, okay, well, Leila, what I would want to say is, you know what, not like as a yoga teacher, like, what did you do to get started? Because I think that's kind of boring when people say like, oh yeah, I attended the 8-week, 400-hour course in Rishikesh. It's interesting. Rishikesh, for our listeners, by the way, is where a lot of people do go to do their yoga training. But I think what's actually really important and what people connect to is the real understanding of like, of why you got into yoga in the first place and like what kind of pulled you in.
Yeah.
And I think, you know what, when you talk about your why as well, I think that's like, no matter what your discipline is, whether it's transforming your body or anything you want to achieve in life, the yoga stuff as well, I think it always comes back to that why. So yeah, what kind of drew you in?
Yeah, it's just the mystery of life itself, I guess. I found yoga as I was living in Montreal and doing a corporate career. And winter were long, so I was looking for something that would make me feel good. And I just popped into a yoga studio and started a 3-month package. At the end of it, I broke my collarbone as I was riding a bike, and I kept practicing on my own in a more restorative and rehabilitation kind of way, less intensive. But in the first place, I felt connected to the practice of yoga, the physical practice, because it awoke a remembering of gymnastics. And when I was younger, I used to do gymnastics. So it was a memory of that. But then I understood I could continue practicing even if I injured myself. And there were many ways of exploring your body and like respect your body in the place your body is in that moment, which is always different. So I did a couple of years of self-practice. And as I was switching jobs, I decided to do one of those trainings. I went to Thailand for a month, and it was a life-changing experience. I needed to understand the roots of it. I needed to understand why I would feel so good about the whole thing. And because it started as a physical practice, but as I was going in depth into feeling my body and conscious movement, self-awareness, I was going also into states of meditation on my own. I didn't know what meditation was at the time. And then curiosity about why would I feel so good when I would practice yoga brought me to do my first training. And it's just for a few years, just the practice of yoga, both the meditation and the asanas, the physical part of it, it just helped me be in balance and in tune, connected to myself. And it just felt very good until, the more I studied yoga, the more I understood why. But let's say that at the beginning, curiosity came because the benefits were so evident, so self-evident. Like I wouldn't need to look for why is yoga good for yourself. I would just feel it. It was just right. And so that's
cool. So if I'm correct here, you used to work in international politics. Is that right?
I did many things, but yeah, my background is like I studied university. I have a master's degree in international relationship.
But the point being, you transitioned over to yoga, so it's quite like a big shift, right? Like what kind of made you feel like boom, you wanted to actually take that shift?
Yeah, basically I came back to Italy. So I lived abroad for 9 years. I was born and raised in Milan, Italy, and I went after my university. I went to London. I lived in Paris and Montreal, Canada, for a few years. And when I came back to Italy, I just felt in this new chapter of my life. My passion was so strong for yoga and the benefits of the practice that's what I wanted to share the most, more than any business development, more than any material aspect of life. I was very interested in helping people learn about themselves, self-study, healing, and development. So this is where I focus all of my attention, is to share this.
Cool. I thought you said killing, by the way, not you said healing. Healing. You gotta kill your well, you haven't got to kill your ego, right? People think you've got to kill your ego, but it's not true, right?
No. Ego is part of the self. It's a matter of mastering it. It's learning how to control the ego so that the ego doesn't control the body and the whole self.
Okay, so for the listeners, because of course we want to control the ego, but for a start, what even, and let's have a discussion about this as well. It's not a question, it's just your perspective, right? Because it's always hard to answer a question like when it's always hard to explain all these things that maybe perhaps simple, but for our listeners that want to learn to control their ego, like what would you say is, firstly, like what is the ego, and then how would you look to control it? Shall I give my description of what the ego is?
Please.
Okay, so guys, I just throw my hat into the realm of spirituality. So, but actually, what I would say is that the ego is basically, it's primarily a tool that enables us to see the difference between self and other. So for example, let's say I've got this coffee, right? And I'm drinking this coffee. And if I don't have an ego, then I might just start drinking someone else's coffee because I don't know the difference between what is theirs and what is mine. So essentially, the ego is a tool that allows me to see separation in this world. And it's a required tool to understand separation, because without it, we're just really going to annoy people. However, the whole investment into the idea of separation gets us into a few problems. For example, what we desire most, I would say, is as you, I think you said, like unity. So when we're truly having the time of our life, we forget that the other person is another person. We forget about status. We forget about trying to get one up on somebody and all that kind of stuff. And we're just in the moment. And so whilst we need the ego to navigate this reality called human life, it's also, we've become most liberated and free when the ego is not defining our sense of reality. We're just actually existing in a state of presence.
It makes sense.
Does that obviously it makes sense to you? Does it make sense? Do you reckon? What do you think?
It does make sense. Yes, it's a part of itself, and it has a purpose, as you say, to help us navigate and survive.
Yeah.
And it's developed in a very early stage of our lives. And we tend to get to adulthood without really realizing that there is the ego and a higher self, because unfortunately practices such as practicing presence, being present in your body, feel the sensations, or meditation, so controlling your mind and the thoughts running wild in your mind, is not something that is taught at school or during education in general. So this is a pity, because you get into adulthood, you don't really know the difference between your ego and that stillness within that is highly intelligent. And many people, they run their whole life until the end of it with a super ego, like an ego that is too strong and it's powerful, and it's just conditioned by many programmings, and is very unconscious. And living from a state of ego identity often brings to suffering.
Yeah.
Because you don't really know your nature, you don't really know yourself, your higher self. You're not connected to your purpose. You're just like running wild.
I would say to seg onto that. Sometimes when we say like someone has a big ego, it's almost like we would think they are often, oh, that guy's got a huge ego. We might think that guy is successful. Like, he might be perceived as being successful by many people. Perhaps he's got, I'm not saying perhaps has a lot of material wealth. I'm not saying material wealth and ego are synonymous with one another. But often when we look at someone and go, he's got a big ego, that guy may actually be trapped into a lot of suffering, or that girl, because they're conditioned of like, because everything, the ego is always about like comparison, right? And it's always about self and other. So they'll be conditioned by the programs of the lower mind, for example, status, obtaining respect from people, getting what you're owed, and all these kind of things don't really necessarily, they're not like the highest experience of happiness. Because I think we all know when we're truly happy is when we're in that true state of happiness. We're not thinking about who owes us what we deserve, getting one over, unless we live a really, really sad experience. If your highest experience in life is getting one over on someone, then you probably haven't really lived life to the fullest extent of itself.
Yeah. Well, in the yogic tradition, like a state of happiness is dropping attachment to existence, to life, to everything. Is just like dropping attachment and dropping expectations, and just being with what is right here and right now. Nothing more, nothing less. And neutrality toward the present moment is what gives you a state of ease. And that state of ease is just simply happiness. If you can be at ease with yourself here and now, with what you have, without any sense of lack, then you're happy. The point is like that the ego mind, the ego identity tells you you are your name, you are your family, you are your wealth, you are your possessions. And so in this attachment to that identity, often you find yourself in distress because there is something that you're lacking, which is just simplicity. You're always looking to obtain something more because you're never satisfied with what you have. As you said, there is a lot of comparison games, and it's our modern society kind of like condition us to always want something more, something that you don't have in the present moment. So you will always chase happiness somewhere else than here and now. So I think that as soon as you realize this distinction between ego, which is a survival tool for sure, you need it in this is a tool for yourself to perceive reality and function in this reality, but you also need to know that you have a higher purpose, you have a connection to something other than that.
Okay. That was quite deep there. So you know what, here's I wanted to seg onto that. So here's the thing. So it's not like, because a lot of times people get into, they think, okay, like if your ego is not your master, then you wouldn't desire anything. So they think almost that we should drop all attachments, but also with that, they think like to drop all ambition, if you like. And they think, well, the spiritual path then is, or all this yoga stuff is, if you're going to do the proper yoga, is almost like a waste of time, because a lot of joy that we get is by achieving stuff. So but anyway, my point is, what I always say to people is, I think actual happiness as a human being comes twofold. By one, actually, as you say, accepting the present moment and practicing that acceptance, but by two, by working on yourself. And that actually learning how to become present is a conscious practice, which is working on yourself. So it's somewhat paradoxical in a way, because accepting the present moment actually requires a lot of work, even though the work is paradoxical, because the work is about unlearning all the previous work that you've done. But does that make sense? Does that make sense what I said?
Yeah, for sure.
So basically, becoming present is a work in itself.
100%. That is part of the work of self-awareness. Increasing awareness of the self, and it's the path of yoga. Yeah, for sure. Presence is key in learning the skills for happiness. And in the end, the point of yoga in itself, I think it's an ancient discipline that is made for awakening our connection to our true nature through the process of self-study and self-healing, to arrive to a point of alignment between the parts of the self, which you mentioned before, the body, mind, and soul. They're all parts of the self, and they need to be aligned for for a state of balance that allow us to develop ourselves. So self-development, for sure.
Wow.
And in the end, it's about self-knowledge, really. Like we all have a different set of skills, and so everyone has a unique what we call dharma, which is purpose in life. And so if you don't know yourself and you've been conditioned to think that success is being a lawyer in a firm, then you will dedicate your whole life to that. But somewhere in your parts of the being, which can be the soul, which is too often silenced by the mind thinks that success comes with being that kind of role in society, and you suppress the calling of your soul for what actually is your true passion and your skill, your personal skills, then there is a disalignment in there that causes suffering. So it's a beautiful practice, because it doesn't matter where you approach it from. It can be the physical part, can be pranayama, which is the control of the breath. It's key. If you think about it, like, breath control is just knowing how to live in your body. Like, we are born with one inhalation and we will leave this planet with an exhalation. The breath is the life force. If you don't know how to control your energy, your life force, then you will be conditioned by all unconscious influences, external influences. So it doesn't matter where you come from, whichever approach you get to yoga, in the end, it helps you find your purpose, your dharma, and to align with yourself, with your skills and nature.
There's two things I want to touch on there then, which is, one is, I think yoga really segs into all parts of life then, in a way. It's something you meant, basically talking about how it's an integrated system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same when you're working with clients in my field, fitness, you know, is the body is a system of systems. There's no getting around that fact. And if you want to achieve, you know, whether it's kind of coming into present moment with the yoga, or even just getting a better body, you have to respect the fact that the body is a system of systems. Like, for example, you've got your sleep. You have to take that part of it seriously. I personally think, I shared this with you perhaps before, but I feel like sleep, if you do it properly, is a form of healing. Whatever stressful events that you have in the day, when you go to bed, that's a chance to actually allow your body to rest and allow your mind to rest. Obviously, the nutrition part of it, the food you put into your body, is extremely important. And then we know the training part of it. But the funny thing about the training as well, when it comes to the work that I do, you know, helping to change your body and stuff, it actually demands presence. Otherwise, you will get injured. And that's the thing. Like myself, having had lower back, knee, shoulder injuries, like, because I wasn't in the moment and I wasn't respecting my body at every single moment, which I know with the asanas, the physical postures in yoga, that's really what it's.
But don't get me wrong, there's lots of people that practice yoga and they get injured because they're not listening to their bodies. Like, they're just going for, you know, that posture that everyone sees on the pictures on Instagram. Yeah. And their body is not ready. Their mind is not there. Yet they're not focused. The core is not there, and you get injured. It's easy to get injured. It's just fall into the same comparison game.
Yeah, exactly.
That any other activity gets into. Yoga, can be that as well. It really depends on your.
And shares, Karen.
Yeah, how you approach it.
Yeah. Well, it's a teacher, right? Either way, it's a teacher. Same with bodybuilding, is that it's actually absolutely fine to. I really don't have a problem when people say, like, you know, when people say, oh, why do you want to change your body? Because I want to feel sexy and I want people to look at me and think I'm hot. That is absolutely fine. Like, I think because you have to start where you're at, you know, and perhaps if you do get into the yoga, and because you want that, ironically, even though yoga is supposed to be the absolute opposite of seeking validation from others, but it's all about internal personal fulfillment at the highest level. But if you get into it because you want the, you know, the Instagram followers or whatever it is, I don't know, actually doing it in the pursuit of those kind of more base, would you say drives? Like the egoic drives will actually prove to be unfulfilling eventually, and it will lead you to the actual course of progress. I mean, at least that's the reflection on my own personal journey, where 100% I was going for, you know, I still love, don't get me wrong, I still love having a good body and I still love like lifting heavy weight and all that kind of stuff, but I was lifting heavy weight at the detriment of listening to my body, which then led me to injuries, which led me to have many kind of dark nights of the soul, not that I even knew what that term meant at that time, and then do some serious introspection and reflection and reframe the whole way I did it, and just change my attitude towards everything and become much more mindful of training and having that appreciation for my body, etc. Anyway, my point being, maybe the true yoga is to start where you are, and that's fine. Does that make sense? Anything to say on that?
Well, yeah, I think the practice itself is a teacher. It's just showing you where you need to work to improve your awareness of yourself, your self-knowledge, self-study, and everything, to get to a point where you have control of yourself, self-mastery. So in the end, it's just showing you what you need to see in that moment. And if it's more compassion toward your body, and patience, then that's what you're being shown in that moment.
We've been taught.
If it's discipline, commitment, and strength, it's a different phase. But I mean, there is yoga at every stages in life for everyone.
Every second is a lesson.
Yeah. In the end, like, I like to see it as the science of the soul. Like it applies for everyone. It's been a discipline that has been developed in thousands of years, and it's timeless technology. It does apply to every aspect of the self. So again, yeah, it's a great teacher. It's a timeless, great teacher.
Well, I guess it is. So the thing is, another thing as well is a lot of people think yoga is they think it's the physical postures. They think, okay, like me, for example, and even myself as a dude for a long time that's interested in lifting weights and being strong, I thought, well, what's the point? Because it seems that whenever you type in yoga, it's all just physical postures. And even though I have shifted my perspective on that in terms of like what I think, even the physical, I see the value in physical postures now, which I'll share that in a moment. But there's a lot more. Basically, what I want to say is there is a lot more to yoga, right?
Yeah, for sure. We mentioned before other aspects, like yoga. It's a set of techniques and includes the asanas, the physical postures, which mainly they're about aligning the muscular skeletal system. So it's about stacking joints in a set of postures, which then there is like meditation. Meditation is about mastering the mind, controlling it so that you can get to a space of silence and presence. And yeah, it's great for releasing stress and anxiety, and getting to a place of ease. There is pranayama, which is breath control. We said it before, to be able to control the state of your being, like not like controlling your emotions through the breath, and instead of like getting into panic attacks all the time, just coming back to the breath to be able to control the moment. Okay, so then there are techniques about chanting and devotion, getting connected to your voice, and a state of ecstasy, if you wish, in contemplating. What is that?
I still have a hard time with that. I still feel a bit like a.
I mean, as we said, different practices, you can approach it from different points of view, but you're always doing the same work. And when you will be ready, that teacher will come to you. Devotion is something that has been so.
Okay, so what is? Sorry, I was going to interrupt. What is devotion for like someone that's a bloke that's interested in lifting weights, that's not even interested in yoga, in like man language, even though you're a woman?
Yeah. So for me, it's about contemplation of the beauty, of existence. So
Okay.
it doesn't have to be a deity. It can be just, if you appreciate a flower or a butterfly or a tree or a river,
Yeah.
then you're already in a state of devotion. You're
Okay.
feeling and seeing the beauty of existence in whatever you're contemplating. And it can be a book. You love playing the guitar. In itself, that guitar can be
Devotional
a
act.
state of contemplation, your state of devotion for yourself, for the music, for the sound that you're playing, for the moment that you're experiencing. That is devotion. It's just realizing that the moment that you're living is precious and is beautiful, and it's about celebrating life by being present in that moment and seeing how beautiful that moment is.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for the explanation. Okay, so devotion. So, for example, one thing that I've been chatting about recently, I guess I've been doing devotion without realizing it then, is I had a realization recently where basically I've been living my life although I've been meditating now for like over 2 years, yeah, although I've been meditating now for over 2 years, like I thought I was pretty zen because I was meditating and I was, like even I guess my ego had attachments to it, like, these guys, they cannot access the higher truth because they cannot spend time with their mind. But then, not to say that those are my primary thoughts, but obviously through meditation you get better at observing your mind, so you can actually see the thoughts that run through your mind. But anyway, my point is, I had the realization that I was always looking for distractions in parts of my life. For example, like I couldn't eat my dinner without watching something on YouTube, or I would go to the loo, sit down on the toilet, I need to look at my phone. And actually, the funny thing is, like, if you think about it, like certain experiences, they're experiences to be lived, and we completely tune out of life through that. For example, I chatted to my friend the other day, and he was saying that, like, back in the day, eating would be the most, unless you had like sex that day or something, eating would be the most intense experience of that day, probably. Maybe it'd be hunting or whatever, but eating would be super intense, and it would be like, woof. Whereas now we're living in a state where we're like distracting ourselves so much that eating by itself, if you think about it, which like your tongue is a tool, your tongue is a tool equipped with sensory, taste buds, to like make eating an amazing experience. So like nature has given you this tool, but we're so used to distracting ourselves. And like I did an Instagram poll, and I think I had like 11 people or whatever, but like I think 7 of them, or over 50% of them, like were used to eating with a form of stimulation. Anyway, my point being, going back to devotional practice, is I've realized that's a problem for me, because I think a lot of us know that being happy is about being present, even if we don't even know what that means, because the ego mind finds it hard to understand these concepts, right? So, because the ego mind it's a program. But anyway, right. So the point is, essentially, eating your food is a form of devotion. Is that correct? Or could it be?
Yeah.
Like, do it without distraction. If you say, I'm going to eat this meal, and I'm going to just focus on this meal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. I think whenever you are appreciating the essence of that reality that you're experiencing, which can be, again, anything really, it's just you are honoring
the
source of it. And if you're really into doing the experience that you're doing, if you're really present and aware, that sense of devotion comes with the honor that you give to the source, basically.
Source being the experience of life itself.
Well, the understanding that there is a higher dimension, or something higher than ourselves, than our ego identity, recognizing that the energy that holds us together and allow us to experience what we experience in this planet, in this dimension, in this body, in everything that we do and experience, then that 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 knowledge, that sense of like, you know, belonging
Yeah.
to something whole, then I think that's a key.
Okay, so tapping into a high level of awareness. I'll chime in with my understanding of that.
Yeah.
Because I'm aware we may have listeners that, like, some of them may be like atheist, or some of them maybe do believe in like a higher power or something. And from my personal experience, is actually learning essentially that the true beauty of life comes when you make your peace with life. Personally, I don't know what happens when I die. That's the truth. And the more I can surrender to that fact of not knowing, because I think as you once said to me, Leila, if there's a lion in the room, are you afraid of the lion or are you afraid of death? Because you're not afraid of the lion, because you can see a lion on the TV, and you're not afraid of the lion. Actually, the lion represents the end of your experience on this earth. And actually, you can extrapolate is that even the right word? Like, all your fears, whether it's getting something to work on time, because if you don't get it to work on time, then what if you get sacked from your job? Then you don't have any money, and then if you don't have any money, then you could get, like, one of our biggest fears is rejection, because back in the day it would represent eviction from the tribe we were in, and then that tribe, if we got evicted from that tribe, it could mean death. So anyway, the understanding that all fears stem from the fear of death, and learning to, perhaps we'll always have, to an extent, a natural fear that kicks in. Like, if someone pushes us over a cliff, we might experience fear at that moment, no matter how many lifetimes we've spent enlightening ourselves. But anyway, my point is, it's learning to surrender to life, I think, and that's where you taste the true nature of life.
Yeah, it's hard to understand what you're saying if you haven't experienced it.
It needs to make sense, yeah. Like,
but I think
it doesn't matter, because if it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. And once you get to the point where it doesn't matter, then there's an awareness of life that kicks in that's on a whole other level. And I've experienced this fleetingly for moments, whether it's minutes or hours. But I think we all have, but often
exactly. I think so too. I think everyone in different ways have experienced that sense at a certain point in their life. Yeah, I think we are energy, and it doesn't matter what you believe the afterlife is.
Yeah.
Energy in emotion, like we vibrate, and something has set that energy in motion. That will force that have set this whole universe in motion and has allowed this experience to be possible.
Yeah.
That is the source for me, and it's a source of energy, it's a source of existence and life and awareness, and it doesn't matter how you call it, like, it really doesn't matter. But as long as you recognize that this magic is happening for some will force that has been put in motion, then that's already like what you need to experience the devotion that we were talking about, just like being able to appreciate the magic. And everyone is called by different aspects of the magic. It can be, I personally love nature, so for me it's being in nature and seeing the beauty of blossoming flowers and plants and animals, and all of that for me is so magical. I'm in my world there. But for someone else it's different. It can be sound, it can be colors, it can be many different things that call to awake that sense of wonder and magic.
Wonder. It's interesting, wonder. It's funny you say wonder, because ultimately humans kind of, well, the way I like to think of it is, we are like, and that's kind of what yoga is as well. It's like, we might look at an ant and think an ant can never understand the way a human understands, because a human is like, the brain is so much bigger than an ant, and we're 100 times more clever. But, well, we think we are, but probably we are.
But we only use 10% of our brains.
Well, anyway, okay, but But the other thing as well is like, if you think there's like a trillion atoms in a grain of sand or something, I don't know. And then if you extrapolate that out to the universe, how many atoms are there in the universe? And there's more information than we can ever consciously perceive using our minds.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only thing we can do is wonder. That's the only, to an extent, with the machinery that we have available, the only thing we can do is wonder with that. But what we can do is retune ourselves to life, to actually appreciate and enjoy life. Because right now, of course, we have a anxiety epidemic, we have a depression epidemic, not just because of the current situation, but before then as well. Obesity epidemic in this country, big time. People are suffering, man. There's no doubt we live in a culture of materialism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the more you have, the more Instagram followers, or the more, get your, even right from the very beginning of I'm not saying there's not value in these value systems, by the way. I'm not saying they don't serve a purpose, but it's bred into us from a very young age, like getting a mortgage, getting a house. That's like great value of once you've got, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but at the same time, it's bred into our very nature that possession is what creates happiness, when is that actually the truth? And here's a very funny thing I'd say as well, is I'd say that most people are not even consciously aware that they're in the pursuit of happiness. But we all desire peace, love, and happiness, all of us.
Yeah, that's true.
We may not.
When you actually ask people, what do you desire the most?
Yeah.
Most people would answer, I just want to be happy. But they don't know where the source of happiness is. Yeah. And so they identify happiness with possessions.
Or the body, for example.
Many times with money. But why? Because
the body.
If you think of the body image. But if you think about all the conditioning that has been promoted through the telly, or the social media and all of that, many people tend to do this because of what they've been taught. I think education is key to change this dynamics.
Change the dynamic?
Yeah, of understanding happiness,
Change the dynamic of understanding happiness. So I guess what you're saying is simply to question what really makes you happy. For yourself.
Like being taught how to be happy, being taught for real what is happiness, and not because, as you said, like the mind is our tool to experience reality. So if our mind is conditioned and programmed to a certain set of ideas, then they will reflect our perception of reality, and our sense of happiness will be dependent on it. So if our sense of happiness is dependent on the material possessions, we will hardly be happy with what we have, ever. And that will lead to a sense of scarcity, lack, insufficiency, suffering, basically.
Because by trying to have more, you can only focus on what you do not have. I mean, you may be able to recondition your mind, I guess, but perhaps that's not true. But the brain does have a negativity bias, right?
But in that sense, I'm not saying that we should all give up our drive to be successful. It's just it's how we approach success that should be reframed.
Yes, how we approach success that should be reframed. Yeah. Well, as I said earlier, I feel that happiness as human beings is learning to be happy with what we have, but also that ironically, that process of learning to be happy with what we have is a process of conscious living, which requires our attention, which is a form of self-improvement as well. I think it ties over back into bodybuilding, fitness as well. Is, of course, a lot of us start out because we desire, like I was overweight as a kid, so I wanted, I always wanted a set of abs when I was younger, and I was desiring strongly that body, that look, or whatever it is. And again, it was great because it enabled me to learn a whole load of habits and etc., which have set up a healthy lifestyle for me that I'm extremely grateful for. Because when I was younger, I was into all sorts of stuff. If I'd have followed on that path, who knows where I'd be now. So my egoic desire to have a better body was actually great because it led me down this path of self-discovery. But the old classic, which you always say in bodybuilding, is in fitness, is to fall in love with the process itself. So when you can, a form of devotion, right? When you can extract value from the meals you're eating, from the workout itself, from being present in the moment, from living a lifestyle that gives you back health if you're mindful to it. And the irony is that if you're outcome dependent, I mean, of course, we're all outcome dependent to an extent, but if you're not practicing falling in love with the process, then yes, you may get results in the short term. For example, when I was younger, I dieted, it got extremely lean in a very, very short period of time, and very outcome focused. But you're never going to get the best results long term because, or personally, I believe the universe does somewhat reward you, or just the laws of human nature reward you at your best if you can fall in love with the process. If you can really apply yourself to what you're doing each day with attention, then that's going to create the best results in the long term. It's like paradoxical. By falling in love with the process, the actual outcome is often better. And then it doesn't matter as much anyway, because the whole thing was an enjoyable process. You enjoyed it.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Perfectly said. I think in the end, it's in yoga as well. Like I always teach that, yes, you want to prepare yourself, your body and your mind and your concentration to achieve a certain posture. But really, when you get to the posture, it's not even the posture itself. It doesn't give you the whole satisfaction. Then appreciating all the work to get there. When you get there, it just comes natural. It just unfolds itself by itself because your body, your mind, your self-awareness is ready for it. And it's a work that comes with, patience and also compassion toward your body. Like we all arrive on the mat for yoga, what is yoga, but it can be applicable also to bodybuilding every day with a different body. Like, and if you have to listen to it. Yeah, you have to listen to it. You have to know it. You need to know your strengths and your weaknesses, where you need to work. And this is the motivation that drives you toward your success. And it comes with lessons of discipline, commitment, and willpower to get there, to reach it. And all this just with self-study of your body and your capacity. It's beautiful because it's not just about lifting that weight or getting into that asana, that posture. It's a whole process of self-love where you allow yourself the time you need to get there and enjoy the whole process there.
I just thought of another one as well, which is one that I struggled with when I was younger, which which the bodybuilding path and the spiritual path, the yogic path, are definitely synonymous. Which is when I was younger, I was very, very proud of like knowing it all myself, and it took me a very, very, very long time to enable anyone to mentor or coach me. And it was after a whole load of injuries and all this kind of thing. And then eventually I learned that I needed to relinquish a portion of I guess what it was one, it being humble enough to admit I didn't know it all. And the other side of it was frozen there. Pause. Okay. So, all right. So I'll start that again. So basically, when I was younger, it took me a very, very long time to admit to myself that I actually could benefit from some kind of coaching in my relationship. in my relationship, in my training. You know, I had like lower back injuries, knee injuries, shoulder injuries, and didn't achieve my potential anywhere close to it, and didn't get the amount of progress that I wanted. And then eventually I realized that I needed to essentially surrender a portion of control and be humble enough to admit that perhaps I didn't know everything to somebody else. And that was not just a great transformative experience in terms of my body, but because obviously, I made a lot of progress there, but it's also transformative experience in terms of learning to surrender to somebody else. Engage, is that engaging the divine feminine? Ironically, learning to surrender to somebody else, and learning to be humble enough to admit you don't have all the answers. Those are like massive spiritual teachings.
Well, it comes from a space where you realize that you're not separate from anyone, and the information is out there since the beginning of time. And recognizing that there are masters, there are teachers, that everyone you meet is potentially a teacher, is putting you in a space of humbleness and opening. And yes, is connecting to your divine feminine, but I think in a way that kind of differs slightly from what one would think. It's more about just knowing that the wisdom exists and has been passed from generation to generation, recognizing that yes, you may have studied a lot and you think that you know it all, but you don't. And that voice in your mind that says that you know it all, that's your ego. The separation, I know it all, but then when you step back into your higher self, you realize that everyone is a teacher and that you can learn something from everyone all the time.
Even the people that annoy you most in your life are your best teachers.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, that's always the lesson to learn, isn't it? Okay, so one more thing I guess is really important to talk about, because we had this chat about all these concepts, which is great, and so which really happy for. But at the same time, a lot of people that I talk to say, and this was the same with me when I first dipped my toes into the water with like meditation, for example, is they say, but I can't meditate because I can't stop my mind. And anyway, I'm sure you've had loads of people say that to you in your life as well. I'm sure that happens to you at least once a week when you talk to someone about meditation. So my point is just, what would you say to those people that don't feel they can meditate?
Yeah, I think it's a practice you train yourself into, and training requires patience to see the results. Just as much as we were saying before, getting into that yoga posture or lifting that weight that is your objective requires time and practice and patience and humbleness and compassion toward yourself. Meditating and getting into a still place also requires that. And it's more about enjoying the process of learning how to train your brain to be under control than saying, oh my God, I meditated, I don't know, like you normally start with little short times, but let's say 10 minutes of total stillness and silence.
Yeah.
Well, that's hard work, and you get there with the time and practice. And it's again, these are great teachers. Just the practice itself is the teacher, and it's all about learning to enjoy the process more than saying I know how to meditate, because there are days where you actually sit and are still in your mind and your body and you're comfortable in it, but some days not at all. And it's self-acceptance, self-love, self-compassion to understand that it's okay that some days you'll be all over the place. The point is the self-discipline to still get back into that moment for yourself. Is just going back daily, allowing yourself to train your brain. So I guess, yeah, just stick to it, show up, and be patient with yourself. And it's all about self-love, really. Love yourself deep enough that you allow yourself to have a crappy day or crappy meditation or crappy practice, whatever. Sometimes that happens.
And love, as the old saying goes, love is a doing word. So you may not always feel like you love yourself, but remember that loving yourself, that sounds a bit dodgy almost, is a practice. So don't worry if you don't feel like you do love yourself, because often I feel like I don't feel like I love myself. You know, like as if you say, like, do you feel like you love yourself? And it's quite funny, by the way. This is a very random seg. I hope this makes sense. But if you try and answer the question, do you love yourself? It's the mind that does the thinking, and the mind, you don't love from your mind, you love from the heart.
Yeah.
And so yeah, but if you're attentive to meditation, then it is an act of love towards yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And the very fact that you exist, it's an act of self-love. Like, you have brought yourself here. And so whether you like or not your reality, whether your brain help you create the reality of your dreams or not, and that solely depends on whether you know how to use your mind correctly, it doesn't take anything away from the fact that your soul brought you here, or that part of your higher self brought you here for this experience of, enjoying life and whatever magical experience you can have in this realm.
Well, I wonder if anyone can disagree with this statement. Your perspective on reality creates your reality. And
yeah, 100%. Your perspective of reality reflects into your life. Yeah, your reality. Yeah.
And so if you approach your meditations or any part of your life from a mindset of I can't do this, shame, guilt, or whatever it is, then actually your experience of reality will reflect that. So even if you're a complete atheist, the universe is actually playing a very nice game with you, where it's simply showing you what your perspective is, and your experience of reality will mirror your perspective. So yeah, I guess the universe is always playing with you in that sense. Even if you think about it from a very Newtonian, all that exists is matter way, you can still acknowledge that basic truth that your perspective on reality is creating your experience of reality. Okay, one more thing I wanted to talk about. One more thing is basically, one thing I noticed when I went to that retreat with you in the summer, I did the yoga classes with you, and I came back and I thought I'd had some kind of divine experience, because I was about twice more mobile when I was doing squats and deadlifts, and I was like, what is happening? And my idea at the time was that the divine feminine, because the idea that the divine feminine and divine masculine, which are the two polarities which make up our experience of reality. But my idea was that the divine feminine had somehow entered my body and made me more flexible. But now I've reassessed it, because I did yoga the other day, and I noticed the same thing again, that when I went to train, I was way more flexible, way more mobile, I should say, way more able to control increased ranges of motion in squats and deadlifts. And this is my perspective on why that is. So basically mobility training is rife in the fitness world right now, as you may know. But my perspective is actually that yoga is, certain postures in yoga at least, are really, really, really excellent mobility training for certain joints like the hip joint, primarily the hip joint, the ankle joint, and stuff like that. The reason why is because, this is my perspective, they get you to explore end ranges, i.e. to stretch, to bend under control as far as you can. Like, which posture do you call this one, by the way? This one, where you like go into that posture?
That's goddess posture.
Goddess. Goddess. So I was revealing my
Oh no, wait. I couldn't see well. Was that a warrior? Like, do you have? I didn't see your legs actually.
Yeah, I think it was a warrior. It was a warrior. That rings more of a bell. So anyway,
Okay.
my warrior is a goddess. But anyway,
Always come back.
so, but in that posture, you explore end ranges of motion, bring awareness to it, and by holding that posture, you teach your body that it is safe. We have a concept in strength training called your active range of motion, which is the range of motion that your nervous system will permit joints to move through. And so a really basic principle that I teach with all my clients is don't exceed that range. Because if you exceed that range, you could be pushing your tissues in spaces where they're going to get damaged. However, with the yoga, what you're doing is in a way, you're using gravity, I guess. So you could potentially be exceeding your active range a little bit. I don't know. But by holding the posture and bringing awareness into the movement, you're teaching your nervous system it's safe. That's my take from it. And subsequently, you then get a lot of carryover into being able to increase your range of motion in certain exercises. And but the benefit of that, by the way, is if you can increase your range of motion, you can activate, and you can increase your range of motion with control. You can activate more muscle fibers because you've increased that range of motion, which means you can make more gains. Which
Yeah,
is what it all
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, consider yoga exists since thousands of years, and the body has been studied to a depth where all the postures, they work on all aspects at once. Most of the time, you're working on many different joints and working on all different like muscles group. So it's very complex, and from the discipline of yoga, asanas, the postures, a lot of different sports have been developed based on those postures. The practice of those asanas can integrate any type of sport. So if there is any unbalance, like let's say you play tennis, you always do the same movement, then you need to balance out with the other part of the body. Or like you swim, you're only developing strength in the upper body, or like, so yoga is very helpful to integrate and balance all asymmetries in the body. And also, as you said, like it trains your focus to go beyond that sense of uneasiness. Let's say we do balance postures. You put yourself in a very uncomfortable posture where you have to engage the whole body, be present, and go beyond the fear of falling or beyond the discomfort of being upside down. And it does move the body in all ways and strengthen the spine, which is our, like the spine is what connects us and keep us moving, like it's the center core of the body. And yeah, so it's I feel like it definitely can help you be more effective in your own workout for bodybuilding, for sure, both for the mobility and the flexibility, the muscles. I think sometimes when you push too hard, the muscle becomes so thick and hard, the tissue is not flexible, is not, and needs that kind of support, to be more. Stretching is fundamental. I know a lot of people that do a lot of workout without stretching, and it's not a sustainable progression in
Yeah, I know the fitness industry is very divided on stretching right now, but if you look at a cat, it stretches. But static stretching, a lot of times people talk about dynamic stretching being much better, but static stretching is often thought to be not that useful. But it certainly feels good, and sometimes you feel like you need a stretch. And I'm a big believer in you have to be. The way things feel is actually a very, very important indicator of whether or not it's good for you.
Well, I think in the end, you are in charge of your body, and it's up to you how much you want to learn about your body. And although there is like regular movements and the body is safe in those movements, especially the joints, there is a lot of work you can do in opening up new ways and exploring your body. And again, everybody is different and have different strengths and weaknesses, and you only have one work to do, and it's knowing your body, not anybody else's. But you gotta learn it as you do it.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, every experience you have is in your body. Anyway, all right. Well, okay. So Leila, if people want to work, okay, how do you work with clients? How do you work with clients? How do you work with people?
Yeah, right now, well, I have my activities here in Milan, and I do online because of the pandemic, and we all got onto online sessions. So you can find me on Leila.yoga. It's my website, and yeah, you can connect with me there or on Instagram. And the way I work with clients is, first of all, it's about listening and studying the needs of the client, and then we move from there into more tailored or personalized work, answering to the needs of the person. I do a lot of different type of work. I go from like, asana work, so physical postures, to more meditative practices, sadhana, which is like kriyas for self-development and healing. Do prenatal yoga with pregnant women, and yeah, do some healing, which is also my other passion.
Oh yeah, we didn't touch on that at all today, sound healing. But sound healing, by the way, is sound healing. Like the sounds have a vibrational frequency which interacts with you in a certain way.
Exactly.
And
harmonizing.
Harmonizing, yes. So basically, because what you do with clients, if I'm correct, is you actually create an approach for them that actually takes into account, for example, their like existing mobility, injury history, what their actual area of life that they want to work on is, if they have any calling in that sense. And you basically create a tailored program. So it's not like doing yoga off YouTube. It's actually specifically designed for the areas in life that they want to work on.
Exactly.
And yeah, you mentioned the pregnant woman as well. Okay, and people can find you on leilayoga.com.
No, Leila.yoga.
Leila.yoga.
Yes.
And then on your Instagram is
exactly that again. Leila.yoga.
Cool. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can go to Tim Robinson Coaching on Instagram, or timrobinsoncoaching@gmail.com. You can email me there. And yeah, of course, if you've got any questions about training from myself, you can always just feel free to get in touch. All right, well, Leila, let's hope we're going to have you on again soon, and perhaps we can explore some other aspects of yoga, like maybe the tantra aspect, or those juicier elements. And perhaps we need to talk more about the state of yoga in today's climate, with Instagram women showing their bodies, and is that really yoga? And maybe we can go more into that.
Yeah, I would love to, and thank you so much for having me today. It was a great pleasure to share, and yeah, keep in touch with all of you.
Yeah, keep in touch, everyone that's watching, and thank you for watching, and take care, guys.
Namaste. Bye.
Bye. I'll say namaste as well.